I've wanted to try out doing some life drawing for ages, ever since I got into art, which is when I was a young teenager. But asking your parents when you're a young teenager to go to a life drawing class is kind of just like asking to go look at naked people, or at least to them. I mean, I guess that was partially a motivation. G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza, and today we're going to be doing some life drawing or figure drawing practice. I guess it's technically not life drawing. I think you have to be in the room with the models you're drawing for it to constitute as life drawing. Anyway, the point is I've always wanted to go to a life drawing class, but I don't know, never got around to it, never had the time, didn't know where to do it because I live in a small town and it's not going to be near me, so I'd have to travel the distance to get to one. And I'm sure this is something a lot of you artists out there can relate to, because the idea of doing life drawing and gesture drawing classes is just so cool and such a great exercise, but sometimes it's just impractical. So today I'm going to find ways to practice my figure drawing and gesture drawing with the help of Skillshare, who is a sponsor of this video and also friend of the channel. For those of you who aren't aware, which, I mean, let's fix that now, Skillshare is an amazing website with over 18,000 classes in illustration, drawing, design, and loads more, including some classes that I've put up there myself, one on how to do YouTube full-time and build a channel from the ground up, and then another on how to present to camera. They're things that I find that I have a lot to share with people on and get passionate about. So if you want to check out my courses, I'll link them in the description. But today I'm going to be following along with a bunch of Skillshare courses that center around life drawing and figure drawing and gesture drawing, having a really good understanding of the human body and anatomy and how it moves and forms different poses is just a really integral part of creating dynamic, imaginative scenes. If you want to follow along with me, I'll put the links in the description to all of the classes that I've been following along with, and I'll reference them in the video. I've put a link in the card in the description that Skillshare have provided so that the first 1,000 people to redeem that link get 2 months of Skillshare premium membership for only 99 cents. So for less than $1, if you get in nice and early, you can follow along all of these classes and the thousands and thousands of other classes if you want to learn something new or different on Skillshare. So go check that out. Once again, the link is in the card and in the description. One last thing, by the way, before we dive into the activity, it bears being disclaimed that there's going to be nudity in this video. It just comes with observational life drawing and figure studies. So if that's uncomfortable for you, or if you're a parent and your kid's watching this and you are uncomfortable with them seeing that sort of thing, first of all, let me say it's nothing pornographic, but the human body is the human body and it's going to be shown in this video, or at least, you know, mostly. I'll blur some stuff out for some sort of modesty's sake, but hey, a boob's a boob and a bum's a bum, and we all have them. Some of us have more boobs than others. Every shape is beautiful. Let's get started. So I got started by following a class by Alicia Yetzer called Figure Drawing, Comprehensive Guide to Expressive Life Drawing. This was a really good place to start for two reasons. One, because the style that she follows and that I used following along with her was sort of a middle ground between more detailed and more simplistic. The other reason I really liked starting off with this is it introduced me to a website called Line of Action. It's an incredible resource for figure drawing references with custom tools to automate and randomly select images for you to draw. I followed along with Alicia's course with my own images being generated so that while taking on board her tips and experience, I applied them from scratch to unfamiliar images not shown in her class. So this was a really useful way of both absorbing her information but applying it from scratch and learning it myself. Now, as in the class, I found it useful to start off with a line of motion, which is something I have often just sort of scoffed at in the past, but when applied to specifically this life drawing, gesture drawing stuff, it was really useful just to have that single foundation element to follow along with, and then from there start to work around in some of the construction and then go between that and putting in some shading in whatever way felt natural. I wasn't trying to be too structured about it or feel like I needed to do it a certain way, and I'm sure that while there will be people watching this who will think of things that I could be doing differently or better, I was actually just really prioritizing doing this in a way that was comfortable and going to create a good flow for me. And I found that sort of moving between construction, doing a bit of shading here and there, was just like a really nice way to let myself notice what was most standing out to me, which I felt through the course of doing this several times improved over time fairly quickly. Now, she said something in her course about trying to capture the energy of the image you're interpreting or the pose that you're recreating. And I found that really useful to center my focus on, because I am, as someone who is very used to clean lines and proportions and working in a very certain way, in this much more fluid style of creation can get really picky about the mess. By letting go of a bit of that and focusing specifically on the energy, I wasn't worried about the mistakes as I made them. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're worried about them or not, you're going to make mistakes, especially if you're, like I am, working in an area you're unfamiliar with, but also naturally in these more expressive, naturalistic exercises, mistakes are just an organic part of the process. So how you process those mistakes mentally is an important part of the process. I've said process a lot. I'm going to stop saying process. Anyways, the point is, it helps me to stop being too anal retentive about my production and just really think about expressing through the illustration what is expressed in the image that I'm seeing. Also, while, as she encouraged me to do in the course, prioritizing the fuller shapes first and the lines and chunks and the energy, and later on getting to the details and the shading. Now, something I forgot to mention is I'm actually working with a time limit with each of these images, 5 minutes per piece to be precise. I found it interesting in retrospect how in the beginning this really felt like not enough time, whereas by the end I actually sort of finished 20 or 30 seconds early, just as I loosened up and felt like I'd conveyed everything I needed to, and you know, was working quite loosely and interpreted the main stuff to a place that I was pretty happy with. Something I found quite difficult and had to constantly remind myself to not do was to draw what I see and not what I think I see. Especially when you're used to creating images from your own imagination, you tend to naturally want to just draw what you know an arm or a hand looks like. However, when reinterpreting an image that you're working with, there are going to be weird shapes and flaws and proportions that aren't naturally the things that you would draw. So as I've gone through each piece, I've tried to constantly remind myself to look at what I'm drawing and only draw what I see. And moving on from this, I followed a course by Patricia Caldera, a course called Creating a Dynamic Character Gesture Drawing. Now, this course was more of a stylized approach towards a more loosely interpreted comic style outcome, similar of course to my own ways of interpreting gesture drawings or life drawings before I used this course. And this course was interesting in that it took a similar website that created photo references, and I'll link to that in the description as well. This one's called reference.sketchdaily.net. Seemed to have a few more action-packed drawings and the option to have or not have nude images, so that's useful for some people who want some variation there. I took the lessons from her course and really enjoyed applying them to much smaller sketches, sort of thumbnail sketches, to get more rough and very basic line-only interpretations of the images that I produced. I kept the time limit on, but this time had it on 2 minutes, so I had much less time to draw and really had to just focus very quickly on the core areas of anatomy and chunks and proportions, and the outcome I felt was something that was interpreted quite comfortably. Last but not least, I moved on to a class by Adam McConey. This class is called How to Draw People Figure Drawing Fundamentals, and this guy is really experienced, and you can tell by his examples throughout his course that he's got a lot of practical experience and has really refined and fine-tuned skills. And so this was a really nice one to end on. It sort of showed me how much further I have to go in refining my own skills, but was just a really great example of someone who could really express some of the things, some of the nuances of what he was interpreting in a way that was understandable and I normally might look over. Even as someone who's used to drawing the human body, there's a lot of subtleties in the images that you're referencing that you might not pick up when used to just drawing your own simplistic versions of humans. I followed the same steps that he demonstrated, starting off with a light construction and outlines, and then moving on to just a few core areas of shading before later coming back to some of the refinements and the details. Something I found useful that he expressed was the idea of focusing on landmarks, basically there being sort of key points that if you squint your eyes and lean back, you notice first and foremost. It might be the knee jutting out or the elbow poking up, might be the position of the head relative to the torso, but whatever it is, finding those landmarks to rest on and use as reference when finding the proportions of the parts of the body relative to one another. So I've gone through a few different observational drawing exercises in this video today, and I've had a lot of fun in the process. Now, obviously, as I said at the start of this video, I am not in any way an expert at this, but I've had a lot of fun sort of trying myself in different areas, especially areas that I'm not particularly confident in. And that being said, something I found really interesting was that when I began the exercise, I felt like I was so over-focused on the observational side of things and making sure everything was right, whereas by the end, it was really just much more of a flow. It felt totally okay when imperfections happened. In fact, I sort of felt like I was welcoming them as I was going through the journey to try and portray what I observed. And I'm really glad that switch in thinking happened through the exercises, and I would encourage you, if you do exercises like this, to do the same, because it turns it into a really enjoyable Zen sort of almost meditative experience, as opposed to being too hard on yourself and it being a very frustrating experience, which I'm sure for some people it could be as well. Your talent in art comes both from how you portray and how you put things on paper, but also how you observe. As you increase your skills in putting things down, you will also increase your skills in observing both what you're interpreting and your own mistakes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is some of you watching this won't see the mistakes that I see, and some of you watching this will see many more mistakes than I see. Along with that, I'm sure many people watching this can do much better than I have in this exercise, and I'm sure plenty of people watching this probably feel like this is something to aspire to. I guess the reason I'm opening up with this is it's an exercise and we're all works in progress, and this is where I'm at today, and I had a lot of fun. So I just wanted to go through some of these sketches. Now I did, speaking of all of that disclaimer stuff, skip the first one because I wasn't entirely happy with it. I guess I was just sort of opening up and warming up. I was quite happy with the result of this one. I felt like I was loosening up. The shadows and tones started to become more of a priority rather than nitpicking edges and shapes. Obviously some of the proportions are off, but this was also the point where I started to just let go of worrying about that in particular and just tried to get into the groove of feeling my way through it and having a bit of fun with it, really focusing on contrast and proportions in relation to each other in the various poses. So these were, of course, the first exercises I did, where it was sort of in the middle ground. Not too detailed and time-consuming and refined, but also not ultra-simplistic. I'm still focusing on shadows and contrast and getting in some of the details in there. But at the same time, by being in that middle ground, I don't absolutely nail the proportions or the sense of balance in a lot of these. For example, like if I look back at these after not having seen them for a while, I can see a lot wrong with them. However, I think improving over time subconsciously is just going to be a natural byproduct of doing exercises like this. The proportions and all those things that I'm noticing are off as I go back through them will just get better and better over time the more I do this sort of thing, which is why I really want to do this sort of thing now and then, and why I've wanted to do some life drawing and observational drawing for a long time. So some of these I feel like turned out really cool. Obviously a few things are a little off in some of the poses and proportions, but at the same time the overall energy being captured, which I really appreciated in that first course I went through, being a mindset to hold in your head, to try and capture an energy rather than focus on the details. I'm really quite happy with a lot of these as far as how I felt like I have been able to capture the energy in my attempts personally. So then we had the more simplistic exercise, and as you can see, obviously no attention to any particular details or contrast or anything like that. However, the funny thing is, in my opinion, these feel immensely more satisfying to look at. I think it looks nice because by doing the exercises that I'd done for several hours, I'd really learnt to loosen up and also focus on specific things, realize what the points of priority were in the pose, in the sense of motion, and in the figure itself. Now, this was my personal favorite of the three exercises for two reasons. The first, I think it just looks really cool. I think if you're going through a sketchbook and you see these pages of thumbnail poses, it's just really satisfying both to do and to look at. But the second reason I really like this is because it most readily applies to what I enjoy drawing generally. So comic books and cartoons, just really clean lines, but with a focus on loose pose and structure, organic composition of the poses and the way that the limbs intertwine and the proportions and all that stuff. So I feel like it's sort of somewhere between the realism stuff, but then also with a much more simplified edge that I quite enjoyed. However, there are lessons that you gain from doing the more realistic, time-consuming stuff that build up over time and can apply very, very heartily to more simplified stuff that I personally prefer to do anyway. So there's definitely benefits in the long term to all three of the different exercises I've gone through today, which brings me to the third one, the more time-consuming one. Now, of course, again, I'm not very experienced, so I feel like there's a lot more that could be fixed or done better here, but given that I spent about 10 minutes on this and it's my first more in-depth attempt at doing a life drawing, I really am happy with the result. I feel like there are both huge long-term benefits to be gained by absorbing all this information and learning through muscle memory how to portray the human body, but then also just the experience itself of doing it is something that I found really zen. I actually ended up by the end putting on meditation music because I was so like zoning into it that I thought, you know what, I might as well just turn this into meditation. It was really relaxing and really fun. So I highly recommend checking out the websites that link to the generations of images so you can come up with your own exercises and practice life drawing for yourself. And I also recommend the classes that I've followed along with in the course of this video. Those are also linked to in the description. And if you're going to go check out Skillshare, go check out everything they have to offer while you're there. There's a huge variety of classes, and if you want to get into animation, graphic design, letter design, watercolors or acrylics or various mediums, or of course if you want to follow along with my courses on how to present to camera and how to run a YouTube channel, go check out Skillshare and of course redeem that coupon code for 2 months for 99 cents, and you can go check out all of that stuff. Now that discount is available only to the first 1,000 people to use it, so make sure to get in early and get tucked into Skillshare and learning and teaching today. I really feel like I learnt a lot, but I also just enjoyed a lot of the experience of just zoning out, being creative, and letting myself really loosen up into a method of creativity that I really don't explore enough. Thank you so much for joining me on my little creative journey today. Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, and leave a comment if you want to see more of this sort of thing or any suggestions for future content you want to see. Subscribe for more fun with art, and until next time, I'll see you later. Make sure to subscribe to my channel to see more of my videos, and while you're at it, check out my shop where I sell ebooks, brushes, photo references, video courses, and more. There's another video you might enjoy from my channel over there, and you can also check out my behind the scenes daily vlog channel, Daily Jazza. That's it for now, and until next time, I'll see you later.